Okay, continuing with Unit 9. Now we're at the very end of Unit 9, making the vector logo. And I like to have it be a mashup of your taste and your ideas for a logo with something that already exists, like a theme that already exists. I'm doing Day of the Dead in my other class. In this class, I suggested trying to create a logo brand for a Fables character, because Bill Wilmington put these all into the public domain just in September. So you can look through all these characters. You can make your own logo for the Big Bad Wolf, for Snow White, for any of these various characters. I have no idea. I'm a big fan, but I don't know who Nerissa is. But these are all based, so formerly known as the Little Mermaid, right? So you can do your own versions of these if you like. And I'm going to do this character named Maddie, who's the witch Medea, as this shape-shifting kind of devil cat. And so I did my sketches based on that. This is my refined sketch, right? This one right here. So I'm going to take that refined sketch, and like I've shown, I'm going to show it again. I'm going to open it in a new program. That new program is Adobe Illustrator. There's two ways to easily open it in Illustrator. One is to right-click and say Open with Adobe Illustrator. I've got 3 years worth of versions here, so I'm just going to use the latest version. You can do that, or you can click it, drag it to your dock where it says AI, and then open it that way. So Illustrator, whether it's 2023, 2024, 2022, we're going to learn the basic tools. So it opens up this way. If you're ever unsure about how you're seeing it, you can always go, just like in Photoshop, to Window, Workspace, and then Essentials. And if Essentials gets messed up, you can always reset it. So if you reset Essentials, you're going to see these three things: Properties, Layers, and Libraries. And in the newest version, in 2024, they just added this. You can actually do prompt text-generated vectors. We are not doing that. We are not using any AI tools unless I demonstrate that, right? We'll have our opportunities for playing with that, but right now we're trying to learn how to do it straight, not have the machine do it for us. But God, I am curious because I haven't played with this yet. So let's see, a black devil cat logo. Let's just see what it does. It's in beta, but we should get some variations here. And what's crazy is, unlike these tools in Photoshop, oh God, these are terrible. Right? But unlike these tools in Photoshop, these are going to be vectors. So they look like they were going to be terrible, but what I was seeing was they were just plotting the anchor points. That's not bad. This is going to be how all of you work in the future, unfortunately.
Might be fast, like the Egyptian.
Yeah. Now, are these clear, versatile, and engaging? Some are more than others, right? I'd say this one's the clearest and the most versatile and the most engaging. But to be the most versatile, you want it to be in only black. So I'm going to delete these shapes that aren't black, right? And you'll notice that the way this is set up, those shapes are not cut out of the black shape. They're just sitting on top of it. So I'm going to show you how we can cut shapes out. So though I am demonstrating with this, we are not using this. I do not want you to use this. I want you to learn how to be able to plot these anchors. And then once you've plotted them, how you can manipulate them, like this, where you could select, and I shouldn't get off topic here, but you can select overlapping paths, and then we're going to use a tool that we're going to add to everyone's default settings, and you can merge them, right? So that I can have shapes that cut out other shapes. Now, if you ever make a mistake, all you need to do is Command Z, right? That will undo, and it will undo back right until when you started the program in the first place. So this is the very beginning. I brought in my sketch, and I have properties, I have layers, I have libraries. I want to go to layers. And I can hit Command 0 to squeeze it on. This is what's called the artboard. The way Illustrator is different is your image can go beyond the artboard. So I'm going to use the top tool, which is called the large selection tool. Grab it. It's like the move tool in Photoshop, but it's like a move tool with transform already built into it. So if I click on that tool and I click on my sketch, even though this isn't a vector, I can stretch it, I can flip it, I can rotate it by clicking just outside, just like you would with the transform box. And I can make that sketch look closer to what I want. So I'm thinking about that size, stretched out at that angle. I think that's more engaging. And at least at this point, this is going to be a more original take than that prompt generator gives me, right? Because remember, any kind of prompt AI generation images are just going to give you an average of what's already out there. They're not going to be specific to your aesthetics. And that's your brand. That's the thing you're offering as an artist. But my God, is it helpful that you can generate things and then modify with it. Okay, so now how do we turn this into a vector? Because right now this is just a raster file. We'll be learning later tools that Illustrator can use to convert raster files into vectors. But for this project, it's a simple black logo. We're going to learn how to make this shape ourselves. So best practice is to double click on the layer and you get to this screen. And then you say dim images to 50%. That's called onion skinning. Because mine's nice and dark, I can even go to 20%. So it's just a faint impression of it that then I can trace over. And then I'm going to lock that layer. Layers are optional in Illustrator because every time you make a new vector, it's going to make a new vector path that shows up here. But the layers are kind of like groups in Photoshop. They're the thing that organizes it. So I'm going to lock that and create a new one. And I like to draw my base vector on the red group. So they each have a color. That's the color of the anchor points. Just so you can know which layer group you're on. I know it's confusing. We're going to use the most basic tool, which is the pen tool. And we're going to use the pen tool in the most basic way. This is the fill box, this is the stroke box. I'm going to make them both empty. So they both have a red bar in them. That way, all I'm doing is plotting the outside edges of a vector. And I'm going to do it all with straight lines. This is a good way to start and to practice. So I'm going to do click and then let go. I'm not clicking and dragging. I'm just clicking and letting go. Right, Josh? Click, let go. We click and then we let go. Click, let go. Click, let go. Click, let go. Click, let go. This is called polygon design. There are some people that only design in Illustrator using straight lines. But obviously, my design is all built on curves, right? But this is going to show you that you can do it this way. I'm not going to go all the way around my cat. I'm going to cut it off here because we can always add to it later. And then I need to get back to the beginning. That is important. That's what's called closing your path. Each time I click and then let go, I am setting an anchor point, kind of like you did with Puppet Warp in Photoshop. Okay, you can see once I get back to where I started, it gives me a little circle next to my pen. That means I'm closing the path. The reason that's important is because each of these anchor points is an infinite point. I can keep zooming in. You can see the original pixel of my sketch, right? That point has no mass to it. It has no dimension to it. All right, then you can do Command Z and try again. So now that's a path. It's an empty path. And it's right here. You can see that that got added to layer 2. If I use the large selection tool and click off of it, it disappears entirely unless I hover over it. Right? It's an empty path because it doesn't have a fill or a stroke, but at any time I can select it and give it a fill. And so we're going to give it black as a fill, solid black. I don't know why that went to white all of a sudden, but let's double click it again and make it black. All right, now here's the question. How do I turn this into curves? So if I use my small selection tool, you'll see that the anchor points now have a lot more going for them. These are called cornering tools. And with them, with the small selection tool, the white arrow, I can click on an anchor. First I have to click off of it and then back on it. It's a little annoying. But I can isolate an anchor and move it to get kind of a better placement. And I can also use this little circle here inside the anchor point to turn it into a gentle curve that averages it out. So if I use the large selection tool, click on all of it, it's just like the transform tool. It gives me a big box. But if I use the small selection tool, it will show me all of the anchors and all of their curves. Now, Illustrator is all based on good selecting. So that's why the mouse is actually pretty good. If all of them are selected and you do one corner tool, it will do it to all of them. You see that? So what you want to do is isolate them one at a time, hover over them where they're white, click on it, and then you can mess with that curve. Click out, hover on the anchor, then you can mess with that curve. Click out, hover over the anchor, click on it, then you can mess with that curve, whether it's on the inside or on the outside. This is the way you can do it pretty simply as a beginner with the pen tool. Click off of it, click on it with the small selection tool, then use the cornering tool. This is after you've drawn it all with straights. Click off of it, click on it, use the cornering tool. And you see how it's like evening out my width and it's averaging it out as I go. Now, I don't always want them to be curves. My design is mostly curves, but I didn't want it to be a curve here. But what if I want this hook to be a little different? I can also click on it, see where the anchors are, click off of it, click on it, and instead of using it for the curve, I can actually just move it. Right? Same thing here. Click on it, and I can move it. Now here's the problem with just using the cornering tool, is it's always going to do it on both sides. Right? And maybe you don't want that. So let me finish up the tail this way. Just adjusting each one. And mine has so many curves to it, right? But it can all be worked with. So there is another way. If you don't like this way of doing it, I'm losing my curves. There we go. And that is to use the pen tool in both ways, to plot not just straights, but also curves at the same time. So I'm going to do that with this shape down here. So if I click and I let go, and then click again, but this time I hold on, click and drag, that will give me a curve. It might not be the curve I want yet, right? But if I then click on the anchor point, then I can start with a straight again, which is usually a good idea. And then if I want it to be curved from there, then I can click and drag. So it takes some practice, But this is the most effective and efficient way to use the pen tool, where you're plotting as few anchors as possible.